Blog Talk Radio.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to yet another episode of the Light Sports Ramble. I am Troy Otradovic, and as always, joined with my wonderful co-host, Evan Watallison, out in the great state of Wisconsin. And Evan, today is
wonderful now.
Yeah, it's beautiful out here. What's it out like there? It's like 20 degrees out here. It's like a heat wave. What are you guys up to?
About 10 degrees here.
That's a heat wave out in Wisconsin, though. You got to remember, I lived there for a lot of my life. And so I know we're both.
Compared to what we've had the last couple of days, it's a heat wave.
Oh, that's what I'm saying. 20 degrees here is like a heat wave too. So, hey, we're both enjoying some heat waves, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. And so today's episode, Evan, is our traditional Wednesday night Twitter talk. I know you and I really love this episode because this is where we take the fans' input and we let them choose some topics for us to research a little bit, talk about it, in our perspective. And so I want to give some props out to one of our loyal listeners, Gene. Sent out some great topics yesterday. Wanted to know what the Packers should do in the draft. Also, wanted to know, where we need to improve on that team. And you and I had talked about this, and we'll let the listeners know that Evan and I are in the process of tomorrow, and I'll let you talk about the special guest later, Evan. But we're going to recap the Packers season tomorrow with a special guest. And then the following episodes, Evan and I are going to put together a position-by-position evaluation of the Green Bay Packers, go over how we felt they played during the year, and then talk about, do we need to improve the position? Do we stand status quo? What do we do? And do we do it through free agency or through the draft? So that's going to be a nice little series of episodes as we move along with Packers. But, Gene, we appreciate the input. The two topics we're going to go with tonight, Evan, we got to give props out to Ben. Today was Hall of Fame for baseball, Evan. The voters had their votes. Baseball Hall of Fame has some inductees. We'll talk about that for a little bit. And then we're going to get into probably the biggest question of the day and the biggest topic in Green Bay, and that's Dom Capers. Will he be returning to Green Bay for another season? And before we get into that, because you and I will probably spend a lot more time on that, I'm going to start off with the Baseball Hall of Fame. This is the first time that they've had three people go in since 1999, when our beloved Robin Yount was in with George Brett and Nolan Ryan. So since 1999, the first time that three players have been voted into the Hall of Fame. And the voting margin, Evan, is what surprised me. I'm not surprised at the players. You got Greg Maddux, a great player, Tom Glavine, Frank Thomas, three great players, all deserving of the Hall of Fame. What really surprised me is the percentage of votes. 97% for Maddux, 91.9% for Glavine, and 83.7% for Frank Thomas. That's what surprised me. What do you think about the voting today?
I'm not sure how I feel about Tom Glavine being in this year, especially when you have a guy like Craig Biggio who deserves to be in. But I'm not surprised the percentage was so high, especially Maddux and Glavine, because during the whole steroid era, they were the two that were kind of the poster boy for being clean. They did it the right way through hard work, through dedication to the game. And then you look at the opposite side of the ballot, as you were talking pre-show, the whole steroid era guys, they dropped big time, not really big time, but they dropped a few points from last year. So, they vote in those two, including Frank Thomas, who is always thought to be, one of the guys that did it the right way. And the three, Clemens, Sosa, McGuire, finished, bottom of the barrel, and they actually lost votes from the year prior. So it doesn't really surprise me that those three got so many votes, and I'm happy for them all. I just don't think Tom Glavine should have got in over Craig Biggio because, he was one of my – you were mentioning pre-show that he was one of your favorite players. He was one of my favorite players, too, growing up. I was a big fan of his and how he hustled and how he played the game. So, like I said, not surprised at all.
Yeah, I'm with you. Biggio, and here's the sad part. It's not that he just didn't get in. He didn't get in by 2 votes, Evan. 2 votes.
Yeah.
He had 74.8% of the votes. You need 75% to get in. That's what's heartbreaking. Now, he did go up from last year, which is a good trend, which most likely means that next year he'll get in. But I think he's deserving to be in.
Yeah.
Piazza went up in votes, and then after that, pretty much everybody else went down as I'm looking at the voting percentages. So next year, it looks like Biggio could be the only one. Piazza has a lot of room to make up, 62%. I mean, not a lot of room, but enough room to get into the Hall of Fame next year at 75%. Because when I look after that, everyone else below him lost votes, and we're talking 50%. And just a little bit over the steroid, the Clemens, the Bonds, you're talking 35%, 34%. Sammy Sosa, 7.2%. I don't think they're ever getting in. I don't think they're getting in at that point, bud. And so, again, I'm not going to debate that. It is what it is. It is what happens. I'm happy for these guys. It is a wonderful achievement. Like you said, you didn't Glavine, Biggio. I could make that argument. I'm okay with the 3 that made it. I'm just heartbroken for Biggio with 2 votes that could have got him in. So, but with that said, Evan, when you look at the Baseball Hall of Fame and the way that the voting happens, as I did my research on it today, they're allowed to vote for 10 players. And I don't even know if you knew this. But when I was reading it, a lot of times these sports writers don't even vote for 10 players. They only vote for a few players and submit their ballot. How does that make you feel as a fan if you know that all these players have an opportunity, but somebody only submitted maybe 3 votes and maybe left Biggio off of a ballot? How does that make you feel knowing that they're not required to submit 10? They can submit as few as they want or up to 10. How does that make you feel?
Well, I guess it's their right to do that. Because what happens if there's not 10 guys that they feel deserve to be on? Now you're forcing some of these voters to vote for people that they don't feel deserve to be on. If you look at the other guys who was on the ballot, Mike Piazza, Jack Morris, Jeff Bagwell, Clemens, Bond, Sosa, McGuire, Rafael Primero, those guys were all on the ballot. And what if you don't have 10 guys that you feel, like I said, should be on the ballot? And if you force them to vote for 10 guys, then, you're making them vote for people that they don't feel should be in. So I guess I'm fine that they don't have to vote for 10 guys, but I just don't get how so many people left Biggio off their ballot, especially the guys that only voted for like 2 or 3 guys. That's what kind of disappoints me.
Sure. Well, and I can agree with you. It is their right. You and I, of course, don't have any sport writer voting. We're not in the Baseball Writers Association. And it doesn't matter whether it's the Baseball Hall of Fame, the NFL Football Hall of Fame, the Heisman Trophy. There always can be a debate on how the voting is done and should it be changed and how should it be. So, again, we could open up a big can of worms, and in a 30-minute show, honestly, you and I don't have time to do that. But, your point is I wanted to bring that up. I wanted the fans to realize that when these baseball writers vote, they can vote for up to 10 players, but they can vote for as few as 1 or none. I know when I was listening to sports radio, there are sports writers, not this year, but prior years, where they didn't submit a ballot because they didn't feel anybody was deserving at that point to get in. And that, like you said, that is their right. And I'm okay with that. I just wanted to bring that up to the listeners to let them know that it's not all set in stone that they're going to vote for these guys. It's their opinion. up to 10 guys. So with that said, to recap that, Evan, we've got Maddox, Glavin, Thomas all going into the Hall of Fame. Biggio missing the Hall of Fame by 2 votes. So good luck, Craig. Next year will be your year because, like Evan said, I admired the way that you played the game. Hustle and always playing at 110%, even though you killed our Brewers many a times. But still loved watching you play. Moving on then, Evan, let's get right into more Green Bay Packers. And Mike McCarthy had a press conference today. From my take of that press conference, it looks like he is very much leaning toward giving Don Capers another year in Green Bay. How does that make you feel?
It doesn't excite me, but it also doesn't, extremely piss me off. Like a number of fans I've seen on Twitter go out whining about, like, why are we accepting mediocre defense? It doesn't quite upset me like that because I'm looking at it. You look at the name, you look at the talent that Capers had to work with on defense this year. We've talked about it a lot. The safety play was horrible. At the end of the season, you ended with Morgan Burnett and MD Jennings starting at safety most of the year, and that's the start of the San Francisco game with Sean Richardson getting some looks, and they went away from playing banjo. Safety play was just horrible. Personnel on the field was just horrible in that regard. Burnett and Jennings were always very late, getting back in coverage. You look at the middle linebacker position, you have 2 inside linebackers who are both weak side middle linebackers in A.J. Hawk and Brad Jones. Neither of them are a big thumper, and that's what a true 3-4 defense needs. You look at what Capers had to work with when he was in Pittsburgh, Levon Kirkland. Kirkland was a heck of a middle linebacker. And then you look at the defensive line. B.J. Raji regressed. He probably had his worst season I've ever seen him have. And it doesn't, like I said, it doesn't make me mad that Capers is staying, but it doesn't really excite me either. Because the thing that doesn't excite me, and I'm going to talk, I'm going to rant about this on Saturday, is Ted Thompson needs to get the personnel that Capers needs to run his 3-4 fire zone type defense, what he prefers to run. He doesn't have the personnel in place on his side of the ball to run the defense the way he wants to run it. So it doesn't excite me. It doesn't make me angry. But if Thompson gets him the players that he needs to run that defense, it might excite me a little bit.
Yeah, the thing, and I'm going to jump right in here. You need to have the players to run a scheme. And when I look at it, you're absolutely right. We're missing key components. And we talked about it yesterday. When we won the Super Bowl, our latest Super Bowl, we had a player in each of the positions that you mentioned that could make an impact at any time. That was the key. We don't have that now. And you and I even talked yesterday about Monday about Matthews. Is he that impact player even? He is if he has somebody on the other side to take the double and triple team away. But when you don't have another person, they're going to double and triple team Clay Matthews, and I don't care who you are. If you get double and triple teamed every time, it's going to limit your production. And so I'm right on board with kind of how you feel because, yes, I'll tell you what, Evan, I was busy at work today and I was just checking Twitter. Didn't have a lot of time to play on Twitter today. But there was, some comments going out. And are they fair? If you look at the numbers and you just go by numbers, 25th overall in defense, Evan. 24th in passing. 25th against the run. 25th in scoring. 26th in interceptions. Middle of the pack on third down percentage. The numbers would make you think this guy needs to get run out of town. Because, those numbers seem mediocre. But when I look at it, I'm on your side that you can only do so much with the personnel that you have. And the injuries didn't help. Injuries with Clay Matthews and dinged up here and Johnny Jolly going out and so on and so forth. I'm not saying you got to give them a pass because I'm not in that realm. I've been a coach, I've been a player. You don't pass. But again, you and I are going to rant on Saturday about personnel moves and things that need to go on. We had done an episode about, is Ted Thompson to blame? And for those listeners that are listening in today, go to our YouTube page, scroll down and listen to that episode. Evan and I talk about, is it Ted Thompson to blame? And you and I had talked in that episode, Evan, that at some point, Dom Capers is the head man. He's not coaching the safeties. He's not coaching the inside linebackers. He's not coaching the defensive line. And so, is some of it to put on his shoulders? Yes. But the defensive coordinator is putting together a scheme, and then he has his position coaches to teach the technique, to develop the players. The thing where I'm upset about, Evan, is player development. You and I talked a little bit before the show. Who has really developed over the course of the last 2 or 3 years? Because you had mentioned earlier this week, Thompson's on this belief of we're going to develop with younger players through the draft, and it was the Aaron Rodgers comment yesterday that we brought this up. But you had mentioned a few players, and again, I'm not saying there's no player development going on. I just don't see it happening at a fast enough pace for development. But I'll let you take over when it comes to that player development.
Well, I just first want to touch on what you were talking about. When you were talking about pieces on this year's defense that they were missing in regards to injuries. Well, I've pulled up the 2010 Packer roster, and looking over there, you look at some of the names that are missing from that roster. Nose tackle Howard Green. He wasn't anything spectacular, and he did regress a lot in 2011. He's just in the right place at the right time. He's off the roster. Colin Jenkins, he's off the roster. Jarius Wynn, he's off the roster. Desmond Bishop, he's off the roster. That was that big bumping middle linebacker I was talking about. Eric Wadden, he's not here anymore. Frank Zombo, he's not here anymore. And Charles Woodson, not here anymore. And the big, at least the one I consider the big one that's not on the roster anymore, number 36, Nick Collins. He's no longer on. He hasn't played football since his neck injury in 2011, and that's when the safety position started to really go downhill. Then you look at who Ted Thompson had to work. Not Ted Thompson. Dom Capers had to work with in the playoff game. If Andy Mulamba at right outside linebacker, Nick Perry at left outside linebacker, and Mike Neal splitting reps for Mike Neal gets hurt. So now you have a hobbled Nick Perry and Andy Mulamba at the right outside linebacker spot. And then you have Dayton Jones that also playing outside linebacker spot. And it's, there's a lot of guys playing out of position who are having to get put in situations they're not used to being put into. And talking about player development-wise, you look at their roster, and you have B.J. Raji. I don't know what happened to him. You usually expect players to have, career years and contract years because they want to get paid. Well, I guess B.J. Raji doesn't want to get paid. Maybe he thought $8 million is too much. That's why he turned it down, because he wanted to play for, he wanted to show that he was worth less than that. I don't know.
Well, guess what? He played.
Daniels developed nicely.
Yeah, well, and not to interrupt you, but Raji just played himself out of a big payday this year.
And that's what he was trying to do intentionally.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, you had mentioned that you're happy you didn't take the money, and I know people were mad when they found out, when that article came out that Raji turned down that extension. People were all over him. I was okay with it. I'm like, fine, let's see what he can do. And you know what? He's not getting $8 million on the open market. Not in my mind. Yeah. Maybe some crazy team. Maybe Daniel Schneider will pay him $8 million. I don't know, but I don't see him getting that kind of payday. So, but again, too, here's my thought on that, and I'll let you get back to your point as you talked about development of some players. If Raji comes back and is going to play like he did this year, I'm not sure I want him. He really didn't help us. Johnny Jolly, I hope, recovers from his neck injury because I thought Johnny Jolly turned his career around. I thought Johnny Jolly played very solid. And so if you're going to give me that choice, money out of the question, Raji or Jolly right now, today, I'm taking Jolly. Because Raji didn't do anything.
If Jolly's healthy, I'm taking Jolly.
Exactly. And I hope he does get healthy. I hope it's nothing majorly serious where he has to end football because I thought he was a really good comeback story this year. And you know what? I thought he played better than Raji. So there's my 2 cents. But let's give the fans, because it's not all about the bad things. There has been some good player development happening, and I want to give credit to these guys. And you had mentioned a few of them in the pre-show, and I'm right on board with you. So go ahead. Let's talk about some of those players that have progressed in the system that look like they're having a bright future with Green Bay.
Yeah, the one that's really surprised me because he's very undersized for a 3-4. You know, when the Packers drafted him, I was wondering what, you want to run a 3-4, but you're drafting a 6-foot tall, barely 300-pound guy to play defensive end in a 3-4. When you look at those guys, they're normally 6'3", 6'4", 310, 320, and that's Mike Daniels. And he's impressed me a lot. His motor, he never quits. He works hard. And his development has impressed me quite a bit. I'm quite happy with that. And then the other ones that have really developed quite well, in my opinion, would be like, your Sam Shields. And he could potentially be asking for, top dollar, $9 million a year going into his free agent year. Then you look at the rest of the defense outside of Mike Daniels and Sam Shields. I'll give Dayton Jones a pass. It was his rookie year. He's still learning the system. Boyd impressed me a little bit towards the end of the year in his development. But then, like I said, you look at the rest of the defense, you were stuck with, HOF, who's a solid player, but nothing special. He's not the guy they thought they were getting when they drafted him 5th overall. And then you got Brad Jones, who is, in my opinion, and, I know Bill Michaels from Bill Michaels Radio Network shares this opinion. He's a below-average player. He hasn't developed the way they thought. And Morgan Burnett hasn't developed the way they thought, and MD Jennings hasn't developed the way they thought. And really, you look at Micah Hyde, Sam Shields, Mike Daniels, Casey Hayward, I guess Josh Boyd, but the jury's still out on him. Those are really the only guys that have really developed out of the young guys on the defense. And Jarrell Worthy, I guess he wasn't that great last year. Before the injury, but I guess because of that injury, the jury's still out on him. But there hasn't been a lot of development on that defense lately, and a lot of it has to do with a number of those guys don't fit the 3-4. B.J. Raji would be better served in a 4-3. I think Brad Jones would be better served in a 4-3. I think Nick Perry's better served as a 4-3 defensive end, and Mike Neal's better served as a 4-3 defensive end. So, that kind of shows you, and, I'm going to get into this on Saturday, the personnel that, Dom Capers is getting to play with.
And you had mentioned a good point, Evan. You keep bringing up the 4-3, the 4-3, the 4-3. And so, in the back of my mind, as we're looking at the roster developed this year, my thought, and whether it's true or not, is you're absolutely right. Our personnel fits a 4-3 better, but we're not switching our defensive scheme. My thought was maybe this is Dom Capers' last year. Ted Thompson is building this because we're going to revamp our coordinator and get a new defensive coordinator. But then you hear Mike McCarthy today, and it sounds like they're staying with Dom Capers, and they're not going to change their system. So the players need
to.
They
have to keep the 3-4, in my opinion, and I'll get into that in a second after you finish your point.
Well, I like the 3-4. The thing that you're talking about, though, is the glaring problem. You need to get the players to play in a 3-4, and the safeties are so important in the 3-4, and like you're saying, the middle linebacker. I agree with you 100% on those. We haven't had a killer middle linebacker in a long time. A.J. Hawk, I'm going to give him his credit this year as having an okay year. But the problem with A.J. Hawk is such a high draft pick, the expectations were much higher. I mean, yeah, he inconsistent at times, but when we get into the linebacker play, he's going to be a guy that showed up every day, made some plays, made some mistakes, as did everyone. But when there's nobody else alongside of him, you're not making him that key component in the middle. And so there's a lot of things that we can talk about when we get into the linebacker episode and how the linebacking core played. But I think right now that the development of the players is what we really have to look at, and how are we going to address this in the off season. And so it'll be interesting to see what we do in free agency, what we do in the draft, and are we going to continue drafting players that would fit good in a 4-3 but try to force them into a 3-4 system. Now, people may argue with me and say, well, they're professionals, they should be able to adjust. Okay, you and I can then debate about that over and over, and at the end of the day, we're going to have to agree to disagree because we'll both have valid points at that point. But with that said, go ahead with what you were going to say, Bud.
The biggest reason why, in my opinion, the Packers cannot go to a 4-3 is because they just gave Clay Matthews and made him the highest paid linebacker in NFL history when he's getting paid $66 million over the next 5 seasons. Clay Matthews, with his size, he's not going to be a 4-3 defensive end, hand in the ground. Yeah, he did it in college, but that was college. He's not going to be that guy in the NFL. And he's not going to be a solid outside linebacker in the 4-3 because when you put him an outside linebacker in the 4-3, you're taking away what he does best, and that's get after the quarterback. And you look at what happened to DeMarcus Ware in Dallas this year. Yeah, he battled some injuries, but DeMarcus Ware, I think, had one of his least productive years after being one of the great outside linebackers, great pass rusher in all of football. He went from that guy to having an average year, and I'm going to pull up his stats really quick for the season. DeMarcus Ware I'll have to look it up later, but DeMarcus Ware this season had, like I said, his worst season that he's had in quite a while. And if you switch to the 4-3, you're basically now going to do the same thing that happened to DeMarcus Ware. He had 6 sacks this year. That's all he had this season was 6 sacks. And he's someone that I think he has 117 sacks for his career. He had 32 forced fumbles for his career so far. He had 0 on the year. So you took away his playmaking ability, and if you go to the 4-3 in Green Bay, you're going to do the same for Clay Matthews. But that's one of the reasons why I think you got to keep the 3-4. And if you do decide to move away from Capers, either hasn't been officially announced he's coming back, but it seems that he is. Either if you get rid of Capers this year, you have to keep get a 3-4 guy in there, and if you get rid of him next year, you got to get a 3-4 guy in there.
Yeah,
they're paying Clay a lot of money.
90 seconds.
Yeah, I agree, Bud. And there's other problems moving Clay Matthews. I mean, you're looking at, you're going to make him a defensive end, or are you going to make him the outside linebacker? I don't trust him as an outside linebacker in a 4-3. I don't, because his MO is to rush the quarterback. And so if that's what you're going to do with that outside linebacker blitz, you're now losing what we talk about all year, gap assignment. We're going to lose it if you go to a 4-3. And so there's a lot of problems switching exactly what you said.
Seconds.
But with that said, Bud, we're just under a minute. Another great episode, a little bit Hall of Fame today for baseball, a little bit of talk about Dom Capers. I'm going to let you end it, Bud. Take it away.
Tomorrow we have, in my opinion, a very special guest. His name's Rob Reschel, which I hope I pronounced it right. And if I didn't, I apologize, Rob. I will get the correct pronunciation when he calls in tomorrow. But he is an author. He's authored 6 books all about the Packers. He co-authored Packer Pride with Lloyd Butler, and he works with Packer Plus, a publication that goes out in the Milwaukee paper. And he will be on tomorrow talking about the 2013 Packer season and the Packer offseason.
10 seconds.
So I'm super excited, and make sure you listen tomorrow.
And with that said, everyone, enjoy your night. We'll see you at the next red light. Enjoy the evening.